Welcome to the Black Storytellers. My name is Kevin Marable, and today we have an amazing actor with us. Her work spans over 20 years in the business, and you've probably seen her on the Hulu series Black Cake. And most recently, she appears on Constellation, which is the #1 show on Apple TV currently. Chipo Chung is with us. Chipo, how are you doing today?
Hey, Kevin, it's a pleasure to be here and to connect with you while I'm briefly in the States. I'm generally live in London.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for extending your time with us. I truly appreciate it. It is an honor to speak to you. I love your work. And without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. There's a question that I like to start off with every guest that I have on this show. It's a very simple question, but some might find it difficult to answer. Are you ready?
Hey, I'm ready as
All right, that question is, who is Chipo Chung?
that's a tough question. Um, I am an artist. Chipo Chung is an artist from Africa. Um, Dual heritage. I come from a Chinese family. My family were the Chinese pioneers in Africa. My great grandfather came to Southern Africa in the 1890s, about 1894. The white settler colonialists came to the same area in 1890. So, at the same time as Rhodesia, as Zimbabwe was called, was being colonized, there was this band of Asian guys who just got off the boat and walked through the bush and started selling market vegetables and then started a bakery. So those are my ancestors. And my ancestry also comes from a line of African leaders in Zimbabwe. And so I hold these two racial identities um, and and feel because of that, Chipo Chung is really a citizen of the world. I'm a global person. I grew up in a refugee camp. I had traveled to many different countries by the time I was 3. I went to college in the States and have a lot of Chinese American cousins who live in California and New York. But I now live in London. That's where my home is. But I feel a sense of belonging, certainly in Zimbabwe, where I come from, and
Mhm.
definitely as a citizen of the world, because as someone who sits between, has always sat between racial and cultural lines, I feel like the whole world is inside of us, that the borders and boundaries we keep around our nationalities and places of belonging are false. We're all originally from Africa.
Mhm.
And I feel hugely embraced by many identities in many places.
Awesome, awesome. Can you talk a little bit about your amazing journey of how you went from being a refugee to finding your way into acting here in the States, as well as, internationally?
Well, both of my parents were involved in the liberation struggle for Zimbabwe in the 1970s. And that's how they met. By the time I was born, they had split up. And there was this liberation war raging. And that's how I was born in a refugee camp. My mother, who's a Chinese Zimbabwean woman, was actually there by choice. And it's always been a curiosity to me. I'm now a mother myself.
Mhm.
I know a lot of mothers. We're really protective of our children. And to have a mother who would take a child who was 6 months old into a war zone, you think, well, how could you do that? Why would you do that? Uh,
Right.
but for my mother and the politics that she had, that was solidarity. There were Black Zimbabwean refugee women in these camps, and she was in solidarity with them. And if they can do it, then she could do it. So that's how I landed up in a refugee camp. She was in charge of teacher training. So there are thousands of refugees, children, young people, and they were there for many years. So she organized a system where the older kids would teach the younger kids, and they had these great schools under the trees. So that's how I grew up. And that's a big shadow to sit under in terms of a level of generosity to the
Right.
world, other people that my mother had. Um,
Hmm.
but she was always encouraging of me following my talents, um, and to follow the gifts that you've been given. She never held me back as an Asian mom. Asian moms, I think one can think of as being quite conservative, but of course she was quite radical. And I started performing in high school. I always loved reading. I
Hmm.
always loved art. Um, and she always she never stopped me from making that choice. I think she was a real believer in vocational training, that they aren't just these practical, technical, or even intellectual ways that we need to develop ourselves. We all have different skills, whether we're craftspeople, whether we're mechanics, whether we're singers, or whether we're teachers. So I always followed my hobby in that way. She then went on to work for UNICEF, which is, I think, how I landed up going to college in the States because she was here in New York. I landed up going to Yale. I always loved films and movies. I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to tell African stories, but acting was always my hobby. And if you're an actor, you know that acting is a very seductive craft. Um,
Right.
it, it's just an itch people get, and once they get it, they can't not do it. So every time there came a choice for me to study film or to do acting, I would do acting. Or to go to film school or go to drama school, I chose to go to drama school. So that the happiness of it is that my hobby has always been my job. Uh, and in my spare time, I've always been engaged in service projects and work with a lot of nonprofit organizations. So my work is my hobby, and my hobby is is the more technical, practical kind of work that
Right.
most people do.
Right. And that's awesome. That you still, you're extending yourself into, giving back and, um, you know, community outreach and activism, things of that nature.
Well, I think
Um,
when you grow up in a developing country,
right.
um, you know your privilege.
Mhm.
You know, you know your privilege by the bed you sleep in, and even the toilet you do your business in,
Right.
uh, kind of school you get, the car you get to drive in, the fact you get on a plane and take off and go see the world. You know your immense privilege compared to people exactly like you who come from different economic circumstances, and you can't hide from that. Um,
Mhm.
so it's more once you've seen the world, you can't unsee it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But it's highly commendable for sure. We need more people like you to, be able to provide that exposure and the activism and, give back, things of that nature. Um, Now, you are an actor and a producer. You've been acting for over 20 years, as I stated earlier. When did you know that you wanted to be an actor? Like, when did that spark go off in your head?
Well, I always loved it from I can remember the first time, my first acting gig was probably second grade, where we had the nativity play, with Mary and Joseph.
Uh-huh.
I was the narrator because Mary and Joseph, they don't speak, but I was the one who told the story. And it's funny for me because in my career I've read a lot of books, which you can hear on Audible or even in Black Cake. My main gig on that job is is being the narrator.
Right.
So I've been doing that since I was 8. And it came from my love of English, I guess, as a language. But the first time I knew, there was a while where I wanted to be a lawyer because, of course, when you're growing up, there are only a few professions you can be: a lawyer, a doctor, an
Hmm.
architect. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer because I loved history, and I think there's a level of advocacy that I'm natural for. But I went to a convent, Catholic girls' school convent, and we had to be at school at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I'm really not a morning person. I can remember being at my desk at 7:15 and thinking, I am never, ever having a job where I have to get up in the morning and be at a desk at this hour. And I have to say, my choice to be an actor has a lot to do with my sleep schedule. Because if you perform in the theater, you're up late, you
Yeah.
peak at 8 o'clock and then you have a come down after that for a few hours. And I'm naturally a night owl.
Right. I'm the same way. I'm a night owl as well. Now you've been on many hit shows to name, but I'm going to run down some of the most notable shows like Doctor Who, Into the Badlands, His Dark Materials, um, Foundation, Silo, which is on Apple TV, Black Cake, which is on Hulu, and most recently you're currently on Constellation, also on Apple TV Plus. How does it feel to know that you've been a part of so many amazing projects?
It's a thrill. It's a privilege. I mean, I think as a Black actor, there are a lot of first times, there are a lot of once in a lifetime experiences that I've had. And then you think, well, you've had once in a lifetime a few times.
Yeah, yeah.
So I know I'm immensely privileged and lucky in that. Um, I'm different, wherever I am, I've been different because I come from a different place. I have
Hmm.
a different look. Um, and in my casting and the kind of projects I've been engaged in, I think the people who've passed me and worked with me have been looking for that difference. I mean, in His Dark Materials, I was playing an angel.
Right.
And in Doctor Who, I was playing an insect alien. And Into the Badlands to play in that wonderfully multicultural dystopian world, to be playing an archetype of the
Hmm.
masculine female in a futuristic world. Um, they're characterful. They're unique. They're different, very original
Hmm.
parts. And playing Eleanor Bennett in Black Cake, I was playing 25 years older than myself.
Yeah.
And I, I, there's a part of you when you're different that you want to be the girl next door. You want to be accepted. You want to be in the middle. You don't always want to be on the outside, but you also have to own who you are. And looking back at the catalogue of characters I've played, I love them for their uniqueness, and I love them for being characters.
Hmm.
Some versions of acting and actors' styles and actors' presence are always very close to themselves.
Right.
Because I've always, been different from what normal is, I suppose. I love the fact that what acting for me is about creating characters, and being able to not be recognizable from
Right.
character to character. I love that disguise and the magic of that illusion.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Black Cake for just a minute. Um, as you stated earlier, you play Eleanor Bennett on the series. If you could, can you tell us a little bit about what the series is about and your role on the show?
Black Cake is about a diasporan woman. It's about an African American woman and the stories that we don't know that are behind immigrant women.
Hmm.
She's the mother of two African American children who live a relatively privileged lives, and but her kids don't know what her actual story was. And as she is dying, she has a waking up moment when she knows she has to tell her children the true story of what happened to her, how
Hmm.
she had to escape Jamaica at a young age to avoid an early marriage to a bad person, and the traumas that she experienced as an alien in racist Britain in the 1960s, and surviving an assault there, um, and changing her identity and creating a new version of herself when she immigrated to America. Um, and I think our mothers in that generation past were so stoical. And I
Hmm.
think there are many families. that if they dug and asked questions of um, their good immigrant parents, they would discover that there is an epic, heroic journey behind how they came to America, or how they
Right.
established this sense of stability and normalcy for
Hmm.
our generation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That it's a really good show. You were amazing. The whole show is amazing. Which leads me to my next point. And I want to say congratulations on being nominated for 3 awards. Your Black Cake is nominated for a GLAAD award for outstanding limited or anthology series, and 2 Image awards, NAACP Image awards, for outstanding drama series and outstanding writing in a drama series. So congratulations on those nominations. That is amazing. I'm rooting for you guys. I hope that you win, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm really excited as well. I mean, as a story, it was so beautifully carried these intersections, both of the character being Chinese Jamaican, who was
Right.
an original, for me, a gift of an experience because as a half Black, half Chinese person, I never ever imagined that I would play my true ethnic identity.
Hmm.
It was just not something I thought would ever happen.
Right.
But of course, in London, there are a lot of people of Jamaican heritage, and they always say, "You look like my Jamaican auntie." Because a lot of Chinese people immigrated to Jamaica.
Right.
Um, and then, of course, the intersectionality of what it is for my daughter Benny to be a young Black queer woman. I
Hmm.
come from this immigrant background and the kind of safety that immigrants have, which is, don't step out of line, don't be different.
Right.
Um, my daughter wanting to be the fullness of herself, which is why I'm so glad that that is been respected and honored at the GLAAD Awards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Struggle we have as immigrants with our dual identities as Black people, as queer people.
Right. Yeah. And can I say that the young lady who plays you at a young age, they got you guys spot on, man.
She's amazing. She is a remarkable, I mean, she is a remarkable performer. Mia Isaac.
Yes,
She,
Mia Isaac. Yeah.
she played, she turned 18 on the job.
Wow.
She's a very young person, but as you can see from her performance, a
Hmm.
very mature, wise, grounded person. And she's really the lead actress of the show and leads this uh, very high production, multi-million dollar show on her shoulders. She's quite
Yeah.
remarkable. But amazingly, I also have her to thank for the job because when we did our first Zoom read through, there were moments I was looking at her on the screen and said, "That's me. Oh, that's not
Right.
me. That's not."
Yeah. I mean, wow. It's amazing how close, in resemblance you guys are. The casting did an excellent job with that for sure.
Yeah.
Now, you stated earlier, as far as they added 25 years onto you for Black Cake. It took over 3 hours of makeup to add on to do that process. Can you talk a little bit about what that process is like when you're in the makeup chair and they're adding all of that to you?
Well, I will say, I hope that in 25 years I look as good as Eleanor Bennett.
Right. And you will, because you look good now, and you have excellent skin and everything. So
In Black and Chinese.
right.
But really interesting because I think when you are, I guess, particularly Asian, I think Asians often look a lot younger than
Hmm.
they are. So trying to figure out what 70 looks like for my mix was intriguing and encouraging. Um, but of course, we live in the time of AI, so they have these uh, apps, obviously, that can forward think. two
Mhm.
versions of what we could look like. Um, and then they very specifically took a mold of my face and
Yeah.
used they use your actual wrinkle lines, which if you scrunch up your face, you'll see where they are, and
Right.
that's the direction of travel. And then I had two brilliant makeup artists who would then spend 2 hours putting very specific pieces
Mm.
in each area of my face. It would always be a very early call.
Hmm.
Um, I'd have to be, listen to my meditation in my headphones for an hour while the transformation took place. But what I love about prosthetics and what I love about wigs um, is that much of the job is done for you through the
Right.
mask.
Hmm.
But of course, you never know um, how it's gonna read or how it's gonna come through. Being the internal light within that mask. Um, but uh, I I generally through the process of 3 hours, you sort of feel like you're submerging in your character, and when you come out
Right.
with the hair and with the face, there's an inevitable transformation. It would only
Right.
be at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd be quite hyper in the morning because I have good energy then, but about 4 o'clock I'd crash down.
Hmm.
Very, very long days shooting.
I can imagine. I can imagine. Now, out of your other characters, especially the ones where you actually transform into, like you said, an alien insect, um, what was, which one of those processes when you're in, the makeup chair was the most grueling?
I mean, Doctor Who. Doctor Who was actually my first major part in television. And again, that was even more hours of prosthetic. I had
Hmm.
new insect alien. I had these mandibles that came out of my cheeks. And on top of my head, there was this sort of crown of the dome of her skull. There was a motor inside.
Really?
So you sort of like holding a vase on your head, which you're balancing, and then one of the prosthetics team had a remote control, like animatronic,
Uh-huh.
to move the mandibles. That when she was were live and talked, that there was bits of her that were also live, but that meant that underneath the prosthetic, which also completely covered my ears,
Hmm.
once we were shooting, all I could hear inside was and you can sort of see people's mouths moving, but just sort of guess that because you couldn't quite hear them. So that was hugely challenging, but also majorly fun
Hmm.
and remarkable in that to look at yourself in the mirror and not see
You,
not be
right?
able to see yourself at all. But funnily, I have been spotted in the past where I was at LACMA and I was in line to get a ticket to something, and the guy behind the desk was like, "You're Chantho." I was like, "What? Excuse me?" He was like, "You're Chantho from Doctor Who." I was like, "How do you know that?" He was like, "I can tell from your eyes."
Wow.
And I was like, "Are you sure you haven't seen a picture?" He was like, "No, it's your eyes. I can tell you're Chantho." I mean, that's Doctor Who fans.
Right.
That was quite a remarkable thing. Um, but I love the mask. I mean, to have such an expensive mask, which was also in the end inspired by my face. That's how they work. They had ideas of what she would look like, but once I was cast, then they used my face to create this amazing being.
Hmm.
It's such a privilege that you know just got to dive in and have the absolute freedom as well
Yeah,
to do something you've never done before when you have a mask like that.
man. And I'm sure that headpiece was pretty heavy. I can imagine a lot of those prosthetics can be, way heavy on you at the same time, and you get hot.
And on the first day, it was like, oh, having a really good beauty treatment because they peel it off and they kind of use alcohol to like peel it off. It's like, oh wow,
Right.
it's like my pores are really clean. But by day 5, I was like, they're pulling the skin off of my face, like your skin feels like it's getting thinner and thinner. So I don't know how people who have to do that regularly, like they used to do on Star Trek and other things, where it's with week in, week out for your whole life. Because for
Wow.
Doctor Who, I only had to do it for 5 days.
Wow. Yeah, I can only imagine. Now, your current project, Constellation, what is that series about? And can you talk a little bit about your character, which is Michaela Moyone or Moyoni?
Yeah. Um, oh, it's so good. I loved watching the first few episodes, and I loved working with Michelle McLaren, who directed those first few episodes. It's just astounding when you work with someone. She was the first director on Breaking Bad, and she has such a huge track record. But to work with a woman who has such specificity of vision and an amazing ear.
Hmm.
But it's a real puzzle constellation. What's going on? And was really curious, even when we were filming it, trying to puzzle out what's happening. But I think we're on to episode 5 or 6 this week. And
Hmm.
I think it becomes a bit clearer that there are um, multiple realities going on, and that the different versions of um, Michaela and all the characters might be slightly different from scene to scene because
Yeah.
might be in reality A or reality B, um, and that's intriguing, and I can't wait to see how it finishes off. It was a wonderful piece to research, and wonderful to just to track back and acknowledge the history of NASA and how people of color have always been quite centralized in NASA for a good reason, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, the astronaut program was always about trying to show what the ideal future is that America was developing, and it's a beautiful thing that race equality and race consciousness was part of that projection into the future.
Right.
Why she's a veteran astronaut character, now working at Base Command.
Yeah. Did you have to do any space training or anything of that nature? Is it just all, Hollywood magic?
Luckily or unluckily, I did not.
Okay.
Because my character Michaela is based in Houston. She
Mhm.
doesn't go to space, but of course, the story, if you haven't started watching it, is about a group of astronauts who have been in satellite in space, and then there is an accident that happens on the ISS, and they're forced to come back to Earth. But discover that something changed while they were up there. But the actors, Will Catlett and all the rest of the other crew who were up there, they all had to do a lot of training, a lot of wire work. They were out in Berlin for a good 6 months, and they spent months prepping before we started shooting.
Wow.
Um, so I love doing wire work. That was one of my fantasies I got to fulfill in Into the Badlands.
Yeah.
Um, and they got to do some fantastic special effects scenes, but they also had to train in a grueling way. So maybe I lucked out of that one.
Yeah. And Will Catlett is definitely an amazing actor as well. I've seen him in
The storyline is turning towards his character now.
yeah, I've seen him in quite a bit of shows, and yeah, he's amazing. Now, you've also done some voice acting and narration for some children's animated shows, Thomas and Friends, The Octonauts, Super Team 4. Um, can you walk me through what a session is like when you go in to actually do these voiceovers? I'm really curious to know how that happens and what your day is like when you do that.
Well, to start off with Octonauts, and the first session I did, they'd been going for a couple of seasons by the time I got there, and it was such great fun because we were all in the booth together. all lined up, six, seven, eight of us voice actors lined up next to each other. And I have to give it up for voice directors. They have such acute ears to, the trill and pitch.
Hmm.
But on Octonaut, certainly, I had a hilarious time because, of course, there are these tiny, cute little animal creatures, penguins and polar bears, and they're not that in real life.
Right.
And to see how these different shaped, giant-sized humans can create this intricacy and delight with their voices. Those sessions would be very funny. The outtakes would definitely not be for children, and definitely a great sense of humor going on there. But of course, through lockdown, there was a very different way of working, and so
Right.
when we did come back, it would all be coming in individually.
Mm.
And the only person who would have a hang on what all the beats are and how to make the joke land would be the voice director. And we work
Yeah.
with a guy called Dave Peacock, and he does a lot of, I've worked with him on a lot of, in fact, most of the animated shows that I do is the same, for the most part, it's Dave Peacock.
Mm.
Um, and But he's a genius because he knows everyone's sound. He knows everyone's joke. He knows everyone's humor. There is certainly a conductor, and
Hmm.
there's really great skill in that, which I hugely admire.
Right. And so you have to have a good ear to be able to hear and to be able to direct.
Well, I mean, for him, I mean, he could truly. Sometimes as an actor, it's really frustrating when people give you line readings. You know,
Hmm.
the most annoying things. But someone like Dave can actually play all the characters.
Wow. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I'm always impressed. But Michelle McLaren was the same as well, doing ADR, which is the post-production studio work, to just be like that. You realize they really are when it comes to that specificity of sound and visuals. That they really are like conductors.
Yeah.
Impressive skill.
Yeah. Now, if I was an actor that was looking to get into voice acting, how would I go about doing that? Is it the same traditional process as you would audition for any other role, or do you go about that differently?
Well, this day and age, I love the world we live in because I've always been a world traveler. And there
Mhm.
was a time 10 years ago where there used to be this saying, like, never book a holiday because if you book a holiday, you'll book a job, and you'll have to cancel your holiday, which was
Mhm.
always frustrating to me because I was always traveling. But now we live in this wonderful world where you just record things on your phone. So most of my auditions for television or film are I take videos on my phone. We self tape, and for voice work, I record voice notes on my
Mhm.
phone and send them in. But if you wanted to get involved uh, in voice work, I think reading is key.
Okay.
Reading out loud is key.
Mhm.
You can record yourself and listen back. I think with voice work, being very specific about what accents you've mastered, that are your speciality,
Mhm.
practicing those, having those recorded, and actually having things recorded just on your phone is fine if you're in a quiet place. You have samples of the different kind of voices that you can do. Um, I think that's definitely something to just have in your repertoire that's ready. Um, I don't know how I got into to animated voices. I'm not sure how that happened. It's probably because they were looking for something ethnically specific. So even though I sound like I sound, which is pretty much sound like a British person, because I come from Africa and I have a Chinese background, a
Uh-huh.
lot of my original casting has been for African or Asian voices.
Right.
Because you have to have your unique thing that other people can't do. That's how you get your foot in the door, and then you can do other things. Um, um, but certainly, as far as books are concerned, I'd wanted to read books for a long time because I love reading. I've always been the narrator, so I wanted to read books. But the way I
Mhm.
got my first book was through a Zimbabwean. Um, a writer, and she was very clear that she wanted me to
Hmm.
read her book, The Book of Memory, it's called, by Bettina Gappa. And Bettina was just adamant with her agents and with her publishers, it has to be Chipo who reads my book. And so I did, very much championed by her. And of course, in these things, once you get your foot in the door, once you do one,
Right.
now I've done five or six, you know, Audible books. But it took someone championing me the first time to get your name on the list of having had this experience.
Yeah, and I must say that you have a very soothing voice. It sounds smooth. I could listen to you, narrate all the and also in Black Cake, very good, narration. It flows. It sounds perfect.
Thank you. Well, I mean, to prepare for that, and my main preparation was listening to that book, A Brief History of Seven Killings by
Mm.
Marlon James. I listened to it on Audible. It's a spectacular book.
Uh-huh.
It's about what was going on in Kingston around the time of the shooting of Bob Marley.
Wow.
The book is just raw. I mean, you listen to the first 15 minutes, I'm like, oh, did that just happen? This is terrible, but I can't stop listening to it for 14, 15 hours. But it was a real, for me, it was a real, Black Cake was a challenge and achievement for me because I'm Blasian, uh,
Hmm.
coming from Zimbabwe to Britain, people of Jamaican heritage would always say, "You look like my auntie." And I would get these auditions for Caribbean parts, but I'd be like, "I'm not from there.
All
You know,
right.
you asking me to be Caribbean is the same as you asking me to be Russian. It's not in my culture."
Right. Right.
Um, but in this particular part, it was such a gift that the ethnic mix was such a gift that I was like, I have to grapple with and own the fact that
Hmm.
West Indian sound is not where I come from, and I have to learn how to own that. And I got that a lot from listening, watching documentaries, listening to people from that time. My voice is very particular, but listening to that book on Audible, it was a great book. But also just delving into why books are great, is just delving into the cultural history
Right.
of the place and getting the texture of how people live as imagined in a book. You start to feel it in your body. I can't wait to go to Jamaica then. And I was
Really?
envious because the young actors in the piece,
Yeah.
they shoot 1960s Jamaica, so they all got to go to Jamaica. But I was shooting in very wet Wales.
Wow.
We shot most of it, the studio was in Wales. So I'm still waiting for my chance to be embraced as a Jamaican auntie.
Right, right. And you'll get your chance. Jamaican is beautiful. Jamaica is beautiful for sure. Yeah, hopefully you get a chance to go sooner than later. I've been to Jamaica a few times and I love it every time I go.
Lucky you.
Uh, Let me ask you, because we were talking a little bit about heritage, as having both African and Chinese heritage, I would love to hear your thoughts on the importance of having more representation for both cultures in TV and film. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on representation within this space?
Well, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the work that's been done by so many people, both on screen, on stage, which inspired me and allowed me to think that this is possible, but also
Hmm.
the work that's been done completely off screen, which is the campaigns, the challenges, the calls to account that have been made within the business over the past 10, 15 years. Um, it has a direct impact on livelihoods,
Right.
our ability to work, our encouragement of other people. And it's, as someone who has been in the business for the past 20 years, it's remarkable for me to come out on these jobs and see, playing Eleanor Bennett was a once in a lifetime experience for me. But to see Mia Isaac coming out 17 years old, super talented, clearly, I mean, she carries the show. She's
Yes.
clearly super talented. But the fact that she has the opportunity at that young age, which um, other actors who are white or white passing have had for
Hmm.
the beginning of cinema. Uh,
Exactly.
Foundation, that which is based on the Isaac Asimov novel, very white Russians. That's who wrote it. That's who all the characters are,
Right.
and them reimagine it with these two young Black women being centered. I mean, that when I came out 20 years ago, that was not the world that I came out into.
Yeah.
Those opportunities did not exist. We were very much on the periphery, and the kind of parts that were available, more so in Britain than I would say in America. I think America has been more progressive than Britain, and Britain's definitely still catching up. But we're definitely sort of, it's a level of tokenism, which is we want you there as part of the texture, but your story is not centered.
Yeah.
Are we coming in terms of representation now as someone who has a global perspective and who's also very much entrenched in Western culture? You know, I watch the best new independent films coming out of Britain because I'm a member of BAFTA, and I'm like, wow, you guys are really, really scraping hard to find something original to say
Yeah.
because you've been saying a lot of stuff for a long time. But I know there is such a multiplicity, such a resource, such a diversity of stories that come from, like people say, with black cake. I didn't know there were Chinese Jamaicans. I didn't know that. Whereas it's part of the blood and lived experience of many African Americans in this country. They're traced back. They
Yeah.
find Chinese people, you know, all the
That's
fact
true.
that there was my great grandfather, that there were Chinese people in Africa in the 1890s. Or there's one of the writers on Black Cake. We were at this we won the Best in TV award at the Cape Radiance Gala, which was just the other night. And I'm sitting with my colleague who is a Chinese American woman who wrote the second episode of Black Cake, which was mainly centering on the Chinese immigrant family,
Hmm.
Lynn Covey's dad. And her family came to the States in the 1850s to Mississippi. Her
Wow.
family's been here since the 1850s. What is that, fifth, sixth generation? You know,
Yeah.
when you look at people of diversity and you think, oh, they're migrants, they're immigrants. And like, her family's been, I mean, that's nearly 200 years her family has been in this country.
Right. Right.
But we don't know those stories. And um, yeah, representation matters, but we also just we want good stories, and
Yeah.
these are stories of humanity. And I really, you know, there's a respect that we have in humanizing people. Like you talked about me being a producer. One of the films that I was associate producer on and was a real champion of is this Iraqi film,
Hmm.
Our,
Our river, our sky. Hmm.
Our, Our Sky, which is directed by a remarkable British Iraqi filmmaker called Maysoon Pachachi. And it's set in 2006 in Baghdad. And it's just about a community of Christians, Muslims. They're a mixed, diverse community. And what it's suddenly like to live under siege, to be trying to take your kid to school when there are bombs going off, to be having family dinner and just hear the sound a few blocks off and just wait and say, okay, just keep calm and carry on. But just for Maysoon, it was so important just to humanize
Right.
what we've seen on the news since, you know, the first Gulf War, the second Gulf War, and you see these explosions happen and
Hmm.
you hear these numbers, but you don't get the fact these are human beings who have almost the exact same experience of life as we do.
Right.
And if we don't see them and we don't embrace them on screen, if we don't see or commune with their human experience, then they're othered, they dehumanize, we lose empathy. We
Mhm.
have to have, at the end of the day, we are, whether we're brown, black, white, whatever it is, um, we all love our kids the same way.
Yes.
And when most of what we see centers a particular kind of person, we don't see ourselves as the first kind of person. We're an other kind of person, and um, it's 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 not a superficial thing because it shapes how we see the world and therefore shapes our politics.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And to your point, we do need more stories like that, and we need to be able to humanize more stories and let the world know what's happening all across the world, and not just have it, centered on just one demographic or one.
Well, beautiful openings, which international streamers like Netflix have opened up. Like there is this, for me as someone who comes from Africa, a different culture, I love that Western culture is so enamored of Korean drama.
Yeah, yes,
Korean drama is just the proof that we can watch things in subtitles and still get it and still find it funny and
absolutely.
have our eyes open by how different they are, but also how the same we are. And it's just the proof. And it's excellent television, excellent drama, excellent characters, complete innovation. I love what Korean drama has showed the world.
Yeah.
Because we say, oh, 2006 Baghdad, he was like, oh, it's terribly serious. I can't really relate to that, but it's not true. And
Hmm.
Korean drama has shown that we can relate across boundaries.
Yeah.
And our entertainment.
Yeah,
Some
we're also getting a lot of African films too, a lot of Nigerian projects as well on Netflix, and Nollywood has definitely seen a rise as well. It's definitely becoming a big market. Um, what would you say has been the most rewarding experience that you can recall throughout your career?
Oh gosh, I mean that's what I mean actors always say you're never you're only as good as your last job.
Yeah.
Um, and I think there's an extent to which as a freelancer where these gifts get given to you of these characters and these opportunities and these companies, ensembles you get to work with, um, that you have to live in the moment and that's always the best.
Mhm.
Um, uh, I mean, Into the Badlands for me, one of my fantasies had always been to be in a kung fu movie where I got to work on wires. And
Yeah.
so, and we were working with it's Jackie Chan's fight team, right?
Wow. Yeah,
And
that's crazy.
a young person who grew up watching, kung fu movies. That was really a dream come true. Working with, and they're Olympic. you know,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
stunt team. When you see the things that this is like Olympic caliber people who are playing my double. That was spectacular. Um, I did this job AD, The Bible Continues, where I played Mary Magdalene. We shot in Morocco for 6 months, and
Wow.
I loved the costumes on that were spectacular. The sets were amazing. They built basically the biggest outdoor set there was in the world at that time.
Wow, really?
This version of Jerusalem
Uh-huh.
um, to shoot all the streets and stuff, and we shot inside the houses as well and the temple. But to be wearing that costume in that setting, which is on the edge of the desert, and I can remember wearing the veil and
Mhm.
walking and the sun, seeing the sun through this amazing landscape. And I was saying, like with prosthetic, you don't have to act in that setting. You don't have to act because you're there. You know, you- the landscape, the dust, the sunlight, uh,
Uh-huh.
the vibes you're getting off of the desert and your costume and walking in sandals, you're there.
Right.
That was a pretty beautiful and magical experience. Um, and then I got to play for the Royal Shakespeare Company in the theatre. I got to play Dido, Queen of Carthage, which is a play by Christopher Marlowe, um, who, and it's not a play that's done very often, but I love the poetry of it and the heightened language of it. But I loved it because she was an African queen, Dido, the North African queen, and she had an amazing story. So too, it was the first time that play had been performed by the Royal Shakespeare Company, and I had a real pride in representing this classical play from six,
Yeah.
700 years ago, but being a Black woman from Africa and playing and re-empowering um, this African queen who I don't think hasn't been given enough credit
Right.
because this is how our narratives or the narratives of others are turned into a European Western centric propaganda. You know, when people know of Dido, they know of Dido and Aeneas. And the story
Mm.
of Dido and Aeneas is that there was this queen in Carthage, and she fell madly in love with this warrior who came from Troy, who then went on to found Italy, Aeneas, and she killed herself because she loved him so much. That's not true. Aeneas is a completely fictional figure. He
Mm.
never existed. He's just a man from mythology. But Dido is a real, she came from Tyre, so Lebanon. She's a Phoenician woman who escaped as a refugee, an attack by her brother, landed in Carthage, where there were just goat herds, peasants, and she created this major trade port. Um,
Mm.
she founded the city. She's an actual figure in history, but the way that the Italians disrespected her history by incorporating it with their mythology. So for me, playing that part, I went to Tunisia
Mm.
because I wanted to go to Carthage, and I discovered there that she's sort of this mythological mother goddess character there. And so trying to hold that integrity and reframe her within the traditionally white space of the Royal Shakespeare Company. That was a very special experience for me, and how we as artists, as bodies, um,
Mm.
as awake bodies, can take these texts from the past and with the help of Marlowe, try to reframe how women and how women of color have been traditionally portrayed.
Yeah, man. That's awesome. You gave me way more than I was anticipating.
Yeah, give me 2 seconds and I will give you a whole university lecture.
What's next for you? What is next for Chipo Chung?
Well, when I was 14 at my desk and didn't want to have a day job that required me to be at a desk, what I actually wanted to be was a filmmaker. And when I chose to go to drama school instead of going to film school, my thinking was, look, I'm going to learn through acting how to be
Mm.
a director. That's how I'm going to learn about the form. So when I'm not acting, um, most of my creative energy is on developing my own projects as a filmmaker. So I've written a couple of screenplays and
Okay.
it's a job reworking them and pitching them, and that's as far as my personal, professional, artistic growth is concerned. Is
Mm.
the direction I'm going through to in tandem with continuing creating interesting and original characters that we haven't seen before.
Yeah. Do you see yourself getting into more producing and directing and writing?
Yes, that's what I'm spending my time doing, and I'm looking forward to. I mean, it's a steep mountain because, of course, when you're acting, you're part of a huge machine that is financially supported, and when you're making something yourself, the steep climb of
Yeah.
attracting funding and investment to that, which
Right.
when you're telling original stories, ethnically diverse stories, I mean, I think you might get from me that I've been an outsider and I like being an outsider and I want more outsider stories to be told.
Yeah.
Um, but convincing the people with the funding to support that, I think, is a challenge for us as makers of color.
Absolutely. And we have plenty of stories to tell. It's just a matter of finding the right people to allow us and give us that chance to be able to tell those stories.
Yeah.
Now, this is the part of the episode where I like to give my guests the final word, whether that be a piece of advice that you were given, words of encouragement, or a quote that you like to live by. You can say all three, or you can choose one of the three. It's up to you.
Hmm. Well, I guess a director said to me when I was uh, younger, his key piece of advice, which I've always kept, is just to turn negative into positive.
Absolutely.
Whatever the situation is that you find yourself in, for example, when friends of mine tell me, they're unemployed at the moment, um, what an opportunity like in my unemployment. Uh, I used to train in Kung Fu, and that was just me. But when I got into the Badlands, I was like, wow, I spent 10 years going to Kung Fu classes. No time was wasted
Right.
uh, on that, or the opportunity to write that thing that you always wanted to write. One of my attitudes towards my agent from the very start, I think my first year out of drama school, I was quite depressed.
Mm.
I was waiting for the phone to ring.
Yeah.
I was waiting for my life will begin when they call me and tell me I've got that job. And after that first year, I made a vow to myself, which was that when my agent calls me, I'm busy.
Yeah.
I'm busy doing something. So that busy doing something is cleaning my fridge or making something in my house or writing something or being involved in a service project or helping a friend. You know, I keep busy. So I have a lot of plates spinning. Um, so those have been my survival mechanisms. And the last one, um, I would say that I learned, and which shifted things for me, is always that um, your internal reality is your external.
Mm.
Changes you want to see in the world, you start them with yourself, and it's amazing with that internal shift that the world or how you see the world immediately responds. And
Yeah.
same with our experience is just how we see the world. Your glass is half full or half empty.
Absolutely. It's all about mindset at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Chipo Chung, thank you so much for your time, your expertise, sharing a little bit about who you are as a person and an individual. I love this conversation, and just thank you so much for extending, the opportunity to me to be able to speak to you. I truly appreciate it, and I'm honored. And I can't wait to see more of your projects unfold as time goes on. And yeah, you have a fan for life.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It's been such a good time chatting with you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Chipo Chung, everybody.